All right, everyone, welcome back to another act of Stay Hot. Troy, we're at Act 30 here. For those that are just joining us for the first time, Stay Hot is a podcast that is centered around the journey of young tech founder and CEO Troy Crema as he builds one of Canada's hottest tech startups, Greencube. Troy, how you doing today?
Tristen, pleasure as always. Pretty remarkable that it's Act 30 here, Act XXX. We're going to call this one the Vin Diesel episode.
The Vin Diesel Act 30. We have a lot to talk about because it's the first act of the new year in 2022. You and I have experienced a few ailments on our way into this year. But before we get there, I want to introduce our sponsors for today's act. This act is brought to you by GCX, a SaaS subscription service that delivers 10 ultra qualified and hyper personalized leads to a salesperson every Monday to increase their productivity. Did you know, Troy, that salespeople spend over 50% of their time on unproductive prospecting? Also, traditional prospecting tools deliver target audiences that were only 60% accurate based on their ICP or ideal customer profile.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? Well, guess what? GCX is the first ever artificially intelligent prospecting platform that matches you with your highest quality prospects in your direct ICP, delivering 99.8% accuracy when it comes to your ICP targets. So for Stay Hot listeners, we are currently offering the platform for free for January. Is this correct?
100%.
This is correct. And we want your feedback. So head to the link in our description to start your free trial today. We can't wait to get you on this amazing platform. The future of sales prospecting has arrived. Welcome to GCX.
GCX, baby. Yep. Really excited. Wow, we might hire you. Did we hire you?
yeah, that's right. So Troy, this is the first act that we've had in the new year. You and I have kind of caught the bid at around the same time. Talk to us. How was that experience?
Yeah, I think it wasn't a great experience. I think I actually had a combination of the Omicron and the Delta variant from what I gathered on the symptom wise. So of course I would be the one that gets hit hard throughout this whole process.
Yeah.
But it was okay. There's a little bit of a trend. I think just health wise, I'm fine. Still developing a little bit of shortness of breath. I don't know if you're feeling that as well, but something that I kind of still have along the lines there. But besides that, everything's pretty good. I'm pretty back to normal and health wise. How about you, buddy?
Yeah, I couldn't believe how sick I felt. Like what it felt for me was like a terrible stomach flu.
Yeah.
There were points where I was even throwing up and stuff.
But
I'm back, feel great. The only thing
look great.
Thanks, buddy. The only thing I'm wondering is like that's obviously not ideal for you because like this, it's always the start of a new year. It's like boom, we're gonna hit the ground running hard. I can't wait to get start fresh, quote unquote. It's the start of a new fiscal year. Like we have all these goals, objectives, and boom, you're in bed as the CEO and founder of a tech startup. How was that, and how did it like play on your mind, like your mental?
Oh, well, yeah. Thanks, buddy. I know I'm mental. But yeah, no, I think, listen, I don't think it's ever how you want to start the year, but luckily, when you're always attached to your business and you're always working, you don't really take any prolonged breaks when it comes to it, and you're always engaged. You're never really behind, if that makes sense. So so what I would say is, listen, I was kind of lucky because the first week of the new year, it's something called like a New Year's hangover when it comes to business. And a lot of people are still taking that extra week before they come back and really start to hit the ground running, which ultimately was kicked off this week at Jan 10. So luckily, it wasn't terrible timing from that perspective. But I think honestly, it's just having the ability to adjust, right? And we have a great team here, and we built the infrastructure in place to be able to execute without me or with me at some points. And luckily, the team picked up right where we left off. We were prepared for a Jan 1 start, Jan 3 start on the Monday, and we had a great first week. And I wasn't able. It was kind of crazy though. I'm, me, I like to talk, and I actually wasn't physically able to do sales calls actually, because I actually couldn't catch my breath on calls, which is like I've done calls with the flu, like it's like
Right.
almost like Jordan's flu game. Like I've done calls where I'm not on camera and I'm just doing it from my bed. Like I've done those calls, but this one was weird because I actually couldn't talk for long periods of time because I'd lose my breath. And it was almost like, so the funny thing about it was, Tristen, was you had to adjust, and you can be productive even if you're not doing full calls. So what I had to do was kind of suck because you have to push all your calls the following week and reschedule. Right. But what I could really focus on when I had COVID, which was great, was my outreach. I could really focus on doing outreach, because outreach in prospecting and outreaching digitally, you're not calling anyone nowadays because you don't have their phone number. They're not in the office. They're working remote. It's hard to get to people via cold calling. People just don't like doing it. There's a lot of no contact lists. Ultimately, why we're in business. So I got to really dive into just my outreach process, and got to dive really into GCX, make some great product upgrades and innovations there. And so I really was able to allocate my time to the outreach side of it, and really kind of go with more of a product front. To build my personal top of the funnel. And then also, I mean, we're in the midst of a fundraiser now, as you know, and I've had to also do some more prospecting on that side from an investment perspective. So really it was a great week for me to kind of adjust and focus more product wise, instead of maybe selling and talking. But ultimately I was essentially selling myself through my outreach, which is essentially what you're doing.
Sure. And I think that's like one of the best things that, like, I'm not trying to downplay the pandemic or this virus, and because people have had like terrible situations come from it. But one of the best things that's happened because of that has given people the opportunity to work digitally. And so like 5 years ago, if you were sick at home, like, and you were out of the office, there was no real capability of selling online, hopping on Zoom calls, doing digital outreach. People weren't as familiar as they are with it now. So like, that's almost like a positive that, hey, you can still be in bed and like still actively working on your business. There's just no excuse.
It was really cool, and I got to use the Greencube product, right? Like the Greencube product was running in the background. I was on GCX. I was on the mobile version of GCX. I was on my phone. I was like, I had my pillow up, and I was like peeking with one eye open because I was like basically half dying. I was looking at it, and I was like, oh, okay. They got an engagement score of 86 out of 100. Okay, ICP score 73. A CRO located in Toronto, comp sci tech. Wow. Okay, this is a great contact. Click, go to his LinkedIn, send him a personal note, like right here while my one eye open. And we got it done. I've gotten some great calls booked, and so I really have to dive into the product and use it. But even when you have COVID, guys, even when you're sick, even when you're not feeling too great, you can always do something to help better yourself at the end of the day. And ultimately, for me, that was doing some cool outreach and leveraging using the Greencube product.
Yeah, that's huge. And unfortunately, like, you know, what you and I have talked about this off camera and stuff, and what we're trying to do now is stay hot, is bring in some industry news headlines and all that kind of stuff. I think just organically and naturally, as things come up in conversation, that's totally fine. I don't think we need to like be so hard, because this is what we've always been doing. Stay hot. It's just like natural flow conversation, whatever. And so instead,
100%.
as soon as you start to like time block time and say, all right, time's up, we need to move on to this conversation, that's when it gets like bleh. So like, so the way, like, unfortunately, this is some bad news right now. It's like the state that Ontario is in. Ontario just came out with some new guidelines, restrictions back down to stage 2, which is like, honestly, now like a lot of like, it's almost like, have you seen that meme? It's like the time countries have spent in lockdown, and it's like 3 months, and then like other countries are
so
like 6
funny
months. And then I think and then Canada's just like this, and here we are, Ontario's back in lockdown, like gyms are closed, all this kind of stuff. How have these new restrictions changed the way for like small businesses? Like a lot of businesses are getting hit hard right now. The Canadian government's coming out with like $10,000 grants for small businesses. Where's Greencube fall in these new restrictions? How has it affected the way you guys are doing it? Has it at all?
Yeah, I think, listen, I think COVID's such a beast in of itself. And I don't think you actually know what you have to go through. And it's different for every person. And you have to be, as an employer, you got to be conscious of that, right? And like I said, we always, first thing that we do is always look out for the well-beings of our employees. We want them to be safe. We want them to make sure that they're okay, and mentally that they're in a good spot as well, versus physically if you do get it. But given what's happening with restrictions as well, I think company cultures have really been put to the test. I think that's something that we've built our culture around, a very much a work hard, play hard kind of mentality, and build a really fun, high energy type of culture.
Yep.
And our people, it's funny, right? When you instill culture in around a company or in people, and you hire people around that culture of just wanting to not just better Greencube, but also wake up every day and benefit themselves first. We can work anywhere, man. We can honestly work remotely. We can work in the office. What we've done just from a government compliance perspective is, I don't think most businesses are not, we're not a necessity business.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a voluntary approach, right? So ultimately our employees can come in and work if they want to, out of the office here, until obviously restrictions are uplifted, which I think is later in January. But I think the real kind of message, our whole sales team's in right now, with myself, Francois, Clark, Jeff as well is coming in part-time as too. So it's very voluntary, but I think it's a testament to the culture that we built, right? That even during a pandemic, people are kind of sick of working from home a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of Zoom fatigue, as everyone likes to call it. We're getting more people that are coming back and opting in to want to be back in the office. And the only reason you only want to go somewhere and work somewhere and be a part of something is if you really like the people you're working around, you really like what the problem that we're solving. And that's just a testament to the culture that we've built. But the one thing I would say on the COVID side, from an employer's perspective, that I don't think a lot of actually people address and talk to, because it's a lot more employee focused, which it should be at the end of the day, is my message to employees during these times, to your employers, is be proactive and be communicative. That's something that businesses, whether you're an SMB or a bricks and mortar business, whether you're a digital online business with tens of thousands of employees, communication and proactivity is always key. And if you're a proactive and you're a communicative employee, whether that's the good news or the bad news at some points, but you bring it to light and you don't try to hide stuff, you're not trying to hide from Zooms, and you're just in the channels, active, proactively communicating on whether that's your Slack or your emails, it goes a long way for an employer. And so us as employers, man, we're looking out for our employees. We want to make sure that they're in the best situations possibly, physically, mentally, psychologically, but also help us a little bit too, guys, and ultimately just be communicative, be proactive. Do that for yourselves at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, that's huge, because like everyone's being affected. It's not like some people are being affected and other people's aren't. It's like we're all living through this. I know we're in this going on 2+ years now, but like it's just common courtesy, and that's why the best businesses can adapt. And when they get hit with adversity like this, no one could have predicted this. Right. The best businesses are the ones that have established that culture, and then have established, one of the key pillars in culture should be communication, whether that's in sports, whether that's in relationships. Like if something comes up, just communicate. The more you run from your problems, the more you run from this and that, or you're scared to talk to your person, like you guys are going to fail regardless of 100%. A pandemic or not. So I think that's a huge message. I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And it just shows your leadership too.
Yeah, and I would say to that, listen, guys, I was the guy when I was first starting out as a young professional, still a young professional, but like when I was really young. Yeah. I think we always talk about this culture, right, and the social culture of you want to be perfect, right, and you don't want to show that you have any flaws, or you don't want to show that you make mistakes as a young person, or show that, hey, you know what, I have some gaps, or I have some weaknesses per se. And really, when you try to dance around that, you don't try to talk to it and address it in the moments, eventually it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds. And eventually what happens is you got so much stuff that you've just tried to hide that ultimately you can't hide it anymore, and it blows up. And what I've just found amongst young people, and it's so funny, man. Employers love employees that are communicative and just tell the truth and are honest. And in business, honesty is everything, even on sales fronts and even on the customer centric fronts. If you're honest, you're transparent, you're open to receiving communication, people trust you, they're willing to work with you. And ultimately just being open and transparent, guys, about everything. And it feels really good internally. You don't have any anxiety. Sure. You're not trying to hold stuff internally and try to jump through hoops with relationships, whether that's personal or in work. And it just goes a long way.
Yeah, it's huge. Troy, I want to talk about goal setting, planning. You know, what was your process like at the end of last year, knowing that we were starting a new fresh year? How do you go about that for personal goal setting and then also like company goal setting too?
Right. And I think personally, like it's funny, right? It's I think personally I took a little bit of time over the break to reflect on just kind of what we did over the last year and how impactful and awesome that was. And took a day or so to actually really enjoy that. I think that was something that I was proud about. I was proud personally of myself. I was proud personally of all my team members, and I was proud of where we came from. But it's funny, right? Like I think something that I've realized, and we've always tried to articulate in the stanza is, I think setting numerical goals is always great. If you want to set those numerical goals for yourself, and you want to set those numerical goals for your team, and we've started to do that internally here. We want to close this number of GCX clients at this minimum, and this number of GC outreach clients at this minimum, and we want to build and we want to grow that. And those are good goals because it sets a benchmark that ultimately, and we always try to set the goals a little more lofty than what they are, because if you fall, again, it's like the analogy, if you shoot for the star, if you shoot for the moon, you might land amongst the stars, right? And so if you let stars are still good at the end of the day, but ultimately we're always striving to hit that kind of number. And this number that we set for this month is looking really good, even so far in the first couple of weeks of the year, sales wise. And then also it's great because I've had to set an investor number as well. And what I've just found through this fundraise, it's not really a numerical number that you want to raise this at that. It's just a contract game. It's a numbers game, right? So I want to have these number of intro conversations with VCs, just based on my experience in sales. That might lead to 9 or 10, 3 of every 10 usually lead to qualified type of deals that ultimately lead to some sort of negotiation. Okay, so I need to make sure I have this number of intros on my top of funnel investors, at least these many intro calls, at least this many demo calls, at least these many term sheets. And eventually we get to decide here because we want this amount of goals of term sheets, we reverse engineer what the top of the funnel number needs to be. So we set those kind of infrastructures in place from a numerical standpoint. But then I would also say, like, a big thing that I've also been working on right now is, and it's funny, I've been working on with Francois and a couple other people here, is COVID, businesses working remotely, people on break, they're not available digitally, they're not back in the office. These are all excuses. Mm-hmm. These are all excuses, right? And it's funny because I do it too sometimes, right? You sit here sometimes and you sit here and you say, you know what? Well, we didn't hit the numbers this week because ultimately it's COVID, or it's the first week of January, or you know what, people aren't back in the office. And you start making these excuses, and then eventually sometimes you go, well, damn, it's not working because ultimately ops and maybe ops and tech we lost the client because ops and tech didn't do their job, or they messed up on this. But when you do that, it's good to acknowledge it and do that sometimes. But what I've had the wherewithal and which I'm really proud about, is I'm reading a lot of Michael Jordan lately. It's, you know what, excuses, block out excuses, block them out. You know what? Because when you block out excuses, you're going to focus on the anxiety levels that you have, the good anxiety that you have internally for yourself, and you're going to focus on that. And ultimately, you're going to be put in a position to go, well, yeah, all this excuse, you throw it out the window. You go, well, you know what? At the end of the day, it's just you, Troy.
Right. You
can control you, Troy. Okay, you don't have 5. You need 5 more clients this month. And you're hearing all these other things from other people, or even on your team, saying like, oh, well, this is that excuse, that. No, well, guess what, Troy? you're still Troy, and you can go out and get 5 clients if you want to get 5 clients. You can block out all this noise and all these excuses, and you can go be Jordan. Go be Jordan, Troy. Yeah. And then I said to friend, like this excuse, block it out. Go be Jordan. Go be Jordan, friend. Like,
that's right.
Go literally out and just make it happen. And guess what? It's going to be tough, and you're going to be overwhelmed, and it's going to be a lot of anxiety, and you're going to put a lot of pressure on yourself. But what have we talked about from day one, Tristen? Is when you put yourself in those situations,
yep,
you grow. You really grow. And so what your capabilities are today is, I might discover for myself, I can go close 5 or 6 new GC outreach clients in 1 month by myself. And I just took myself to another level. So always it's about setting goals and not trying to make excuses for yourself. Just do the best you can.
Agreed.
And push.
Yeah, and do you know what it is? A lot of people, like, they overthink the big picture or the big number, and then they end up psyching themselves out, and it makes the situation worse, versus saying, okay, like, oh, I need to close 5 new clients. How about I just start trying to close 1? Right? Like why are you making 100%. You're making it difficult on yourself by thinking of the big picture, when like that's going to take 30 days to get there anyway. Why? Like it's an easy way to psych yourself out, instead of just like starting at one place. Small, like we always say,
so true.
Small W's, small wins get you to the big win. You know what I mean? So that's huge. You you also touched on how Greencube's going through another fundraise as well, talking to VCs and doing that kind of stuff. One of the big headlines that came out not too long ago is that Sales Loft, one of Greencube's partners, they just announced their strategic growth investment from Vista Equity Partners, and they've just achieved a $2.3 billion valuation. What, like, you know, before we dive into that headline, it's like, when you hear $2.3 billion valuation, what does that make you feel as a founder?
Duocorn, baby. Not a unicorn, it's a duocorn. It's great. Listen, I think it's verification that we already knew, right? It's a booming space. It shows you that you're in the right space. You're at the right table. You're in the right, and you're talking to the right companies. You're in the right digital space. This whole B2B sales, that's what it does. And it's also very it's also really amazing to look at and see that growth of that company, because the story behind Sales Loft, they started back in 2011, so they've actually been around for like 10 years, and they went through, and the CEO and founders there, they went through a lot of hardship at the start, a lot of discovery, a lot of like adjustments and pivoting, right? And eventually they got it right. And I think that's what we're seeing. And eventually they started to build, and they got that MVP and that V1 and the build. And the growth of that company over the last like 2 years is insane. Like, I think they've gone, I don't want to, like, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I think they've added like over $1.5 billion in value to their company in the last 2 years alone. So seeing that hockey stick growth, and then obviously this valuation coming out at 2.3 billion. It for us as a company, it's always great to see founders have success stories, because, especially in your space, and especially when it's a partner, because you also get really excited that, hey, you know what, one day maybe that could be me, or maybe that could be us.
Exactly. And just for the listeners that don't have an idea of who Sales Loft is and what they do, give us a quick like 2-sentence description of who they are and what they do.
Great question. So Sales Loft is a sales engagement tool that plugs into like your existing emails for salespeople. And what that essentially does is, as a salesperson, you need to send a ton of outreach, usually on a daily basis, to build the top of your funnel. And you also need to track your analytics on whether people are moving down the pipeline, how your calls are going. It's a great engagement tool from an email perspective, a call perspective, and then eventually an analytics perspective, to basically see, get a great picture and leverage that tool to be able to basically drive business as a salesperson. So it's a tool built for salespeople to do outreach, and then eventually see how deals move down the pipeline from calls and Zooms and analytics on that front. It's called the sales engagement tool. Eventually, the mechanism of how it was built was, there always was some sort of sales engagement tool when it came to CRMs existing, so systems of record, which are the Salesforces, the HubSpots, the Zohos and stuff like that. Those systems of records came into place in like the late 90s. Eventually, then SalesLoft came in the 2010s era, which is the sales engagement tools. And that was basically built off of that. The CRMs didn't have a great infrastructure, user interface, and weren't a great tool for the individual salesperson at that time.
Okay.
And that's where SalesLoft came from. And
Right.
then eventually where Greencube now is coming from is we are a system of intelligence when it comes to prospecting. And what we found is there's a major gap within a sales organ. SalesLoft came in and did an amazing job, and these big engagements have done a great job of creating a tool for the salesperson, putting the steering wheel, the gas pedal, the engine in the car, but you still need electricity and fuel to be able to power that car.
Sure.
And that's where we come in. We provide the most highest quality, like diesel, electricity, watt power for a vehicle, which is ultimately that sales engagement tool that we're fueling. And we do that by generating the highest quality leads possible through the GCX and GC Outreach product.
Huge. Shout out GCX. Shout out GCX. So just from this article, it says that this new investment from Vista will help further support SalesLoft's goal to expand into new geographic markets and provide unique product capabilities and support for local customers. So basically, this new round of funding is going to help allow them just simply expand globally, right?
100%. There's a massive uptick in appetite. Sales prospecting in general has, and we might be a little biased because we're in Canada, has, I think, mostly been a lot North American focused. And there's a huge ability to build up more sales infrastructure tools in the EMEA market, so the Europe, Middle East, Africa type of market. Coincidentally, like Australia, New Zealand, the kind of southern portion of the world, on that side, in the eastern side of the world, has actually done a pretty amazing job from a digital perspective. Like Australia was one of the first early adapters onto LinkedIn. They are still one of the most active companies on that social platform. But Europe, Middle East, and Africa are still huge markets that need expansion into the kind of sales prospecting space.
Yeah.
And we've started to see that also in our own business. Like we have some clients now that are hiring more reps in the EMEA, building out their infrastructure, scaling to Europe, and really starting to grow their type of hiring BDRs, hiring salespeople in those regions, because the regions that ultimately can be a massive aspect basically to be able to for further grow. And just an organic thing is like, if you're a company and you launch to North America, your next organic move is to go to Europe or go across the sea to another area there. And vice versa. If you launch in the EMEA, you're most likely trying to come to North America at some point as well. So it just depends geographically where you launch. But listen, SalesLoft, they lead the way. We're ultimately really happy to be partners with them. And listen, congratulations to them and their whole team there. And the great thing about them too is they still have a very entrepreneurial mentality within their culture and organization, and they move very fast. They're really open to new partners coming in, working with them for them to fit into their great engagement tool and ecosystem that they've built there. And that's something that is which I love about them, because existing type of corporate businesses that maybe reach that type of valuation start to develop really heavy corporate type of structures. Right. And it's harder for entrepreneurs and young companies like us maybe to work with the SalesLoft of the world, but seeing that these founders have still instilled that quick entrepreneurial type of environment within a team of thousands now is pretty remarkable to see.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's almost like a full circle ending to this act is that everything ultimately comes down to your company culture. And as soon as you start putting up blinders and, as soon as you start putting up stuff and you cement yourself into one way of thinking, that's when you start to limit yourself. So to see a company like SalesLoft that still has that open-minded, like, hey, there's still room for the little guys, and that the little guys are actually going to inevitably help them grow, that's what it all comes down to. So to all the startup founders, entrepreneurs out there, be open-minded and focus on your damn company culture, because it's probably one of the biggest reasons for your success going forward.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast, buddy. Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Eat it up. Troy, anything you want to add in this triple episode?
Hey, listen, I appreciate everyone kind of jumping in, and just a quick message to everyone here as well. This is we've officially launched this now across multiple different mediums and platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube. We're really gonna we've hired Tristen now to come on board and really try to drive this thing and create value for you guys. So we also want to hear your comments. We want to hear your feedback. We're constantly learning throughout this process. What we say, what we do, what we talk about. It's not necessarily. We're always just trying to get better at the end of the day, and that's something that we've instilled in our culture here at Greencube, and it applies to the content and that we put here on Stay Hot. So let's keep getting better every day, everybody. That was Act 30, XXX, Vin Diesel episode, and we'll be back next week.
Well said, my guy. Well said. All right, taking off. Peace.
Bye, buddy.